And for you, does language change how you write in terms of the subjects and sort of what you're prepared to tackle? You know, when you write in Chinese and when you're writing for a Chinese audience versus writing for an English audience, do you self-censor more or less? Do you filter differently? Do you find yourself saying different things or in a different way because you're aware that, you know, different people have access to that?
Yeah, thanks, Jo, for commenting on that. I think language certainly is the key identity, you know, when you're a writer. So, say if you're doing other visual art, or, you know, the language is not so crucial. And I think when I switched from Chinese to English, that's about 18 years ago, I went through really this identity crisis. You know, not other, you know, perspective, but just as a writer. I was a Chinese writer. Published books in Chinese, and
I went to your book launch 20 years ago in Beijing. I just realised.
Is that okay?
I'm here. We can still hear you. You okay?
Yeah, I think not beyond linguistic comprehension. With second language I adopted after I came to England, I suddenly realized all the difference. First, I think when I chose English to write, I thought, well, finally, you know, I could somehow ignore certain censorship, you know, which is so deep in my bone. And even, you know, I think actual language itself become a kind of prison, you know, it is invisible censorship because you chose certain language to write. And I think with English, even though I wrote in very broken English then, and still now, this kind of liberation, freedom, and the naivety, and the naked exposure, which excited me immensely. You know, as again, I became a very young writer in England. But what about subject? You know, again, and I think that was also very exciting. Suddenly, I could write something kind of beyond China, even though China is everywhere underneath the text. The emotion, the literary tone was very Chinese. You know. But again, I can look at this hybrid reality, which is England, and as a foreigner. So that was very, very liberating and a creative process for me. But of course, maybe I don't spend time talking about the actual difficulty of writing a second language. That's really a big topic here.
And Damon, I was very struck in The Promise how unapologetically you throw in South African and Afrikaans words like koppie and lappie that you mentioned just then, and dominee and oom and tannie and these sorts of words. Was this a conscious decision to throw in this language, knowing that you have a large constituency outside South Africa, knowing that there were no footnotes, there was no asterisks, and I must say I appreciated it, but, you know, did you get pushback from your publishers and editors on this? And was this a conscious choice on your part? How do you feel about this very specific, very rich language that you have access to in South Africa?
It was a conscious choice. You know, it's a very South African book, probably the most South African book I've done. And you know, you cannot get into the soul of South Africa, to put it that way, without getting into the language. I mean, they're kind of inseparable. Plus, there was something in me, actually, that became a little bit rebellious and defiant, if you like. I mean, I've read plenty of books, you know, published in England, which, you know, throw in chunks of French, as if we all speak French and should, you know, just know what's going on there, which I don't. So I thought, well, you know, how about reversing that equation and letting the English, you know, deal with a few thorny local words? It seemed fair to me. And, you know, honestly, I had no pushback from the publishers. I guess if you use language in that sort of uninhibited way, that most of the time the meaning becomes implicitly clear, even if not explicitly so. And no reader so far have said they were mystified by any of the terminology or anything like that. So, but even if they had been, I would still have felt a bit defiant. This is how we speak in South Africa. I'm not gonna pretend differently and, you know, modify language for a foreign audience. I mean, it just seems like you're building some kind of falsity into the narrative.